Welcome to your new favorite podcast, Third Time's a Serial Crime. I'm your host, Jane Wayne Macy. Today I have a very special story which took place in the 1950s in London, England. It involves a woman named Jolly, her husband Miles, and their attempt to turn their old-fashioned townhouse into a guest house. Little did they know that they were in for a night of mystery, as guests with peculiar tendencies and strange mannerisms began to arrive. But first, let's pause for an ad break.
Have you ever heard of rat traps? Have you ever wanted any? Well, shop online at Murray's Rat Trap Emporium. I've got at least more than 20. I got rat traps, I got possum traps, I got chinchilla traps, all the traps in the trap. Shop online. That's Murray's Rat Trap Emporium. We can't wait to hear from you.
And we're back. Just wanted you to keep in mind that what I'm about to play for you is one of the last audio recordings of Jolly Paulson, as she recalls her most tragic experience in the mysterious guest house from the comfort of her nursing home bed. The recording is really grainy, and she doesn't use any of the names of the guests due to privacy laws. Let's take a listen.
Well, Miles and I anxiously awaited our guests with open minds and cheerful hearts on that cold, blizzardly winter evening in 1952. One by one, as our guests arrived, we started to notice how strange and quirky they all were. Our first guest was a very flimsy and fascinating young man who was highly interested in architecture. He was followed by a prude old hag of a lady. She nitpicked almost everything in my house. It was dreadful. Next came a tall old geezer of a man who smoked constantly but was rather pleasant. And then there was a woman who had a very butch lifestyle, even dressing as a man occasionally. Our last guest arrived unexpectedly. I couldn't tell if he was of Italian or French nationality, and he always seemed to laugh at the most peculiar times. Either way, my husband Miles and I were anxious and excited to have our new guests in our house. The very next day, I got a strange phone call stating that the police were coming to investigate our guest house and wanted to question everyone inside about a bank heist that took place 2 towns over, where almost a dozen Swiss watches had been stolen. With the incredible blizzard outside, I wondered if they'd even get here at all when came a sudden tapping at my window and a young police sergeant looking inside. One by one he questioned all of us, but I was able to slip away into the kitchen because I didn't want the stew to go bad. Then things got really strange. As I was preparing meals for our guests, I went back into the living room because I'd heard a loud noise. I saw the lights turned out and our radio blaring out in a horrible little tune about mice and getting their tails cut off. Oh, dreadful stuff, I say. As I fumbled about in the dark, the noise seemingly getting louder and louder, I finally found the light switch after an eternity of searching, only to discover that one of our guests had been murdered, shot in the head, blood everywhere. It was the old hag woman. Oh, it was so dreadful. And as I turned to look, the killer with a ski mask had his gun pointed at me. I was frozen in fear. Could not see my own senses as I looked down the barrel of that gun. Thankfully, I was rescued as our band of quirky guests came charging at him, tackling him to the ground before he could make another shot. The strangest thing of all, the killer turned out to be our milkman. None of us saw it coming. We tore the ski mask off, and he instantly confessed to wanting to murder me because he hated women, and that everyone had foiled his plans. Then the butch woman piped up and said, "This is why I dress like a man. Can't be too careful these days." We were able to tie him to a chair until the authorities arrived to carry him away. I ended up becoming good friends with all of the guests in the house that night, opening our doors to them and inviting them for a spot of tea, asking them to wear silly hats and play dress-up with me for years and years, to which they all obliged, and we spent the rest of our days that way. But I haven't admitted this to anyone, not even my dear departed Miles, but that tune, that silly, strange, horrible tune, it always plays in my head at night when I try to sleep. I can't forget it.
Miss Paulson, it's time for your medication.
Thank you, dear. Thank you.
Now, I'm noticing a few things with Jolly's story that caught my attention. For one, she was always running away from her problems and retreating into her own wealth as an escape. Now, that's a red flag. And what became of the Swiss watches? Were they ever found? Were they ever worth millions of dollars? What was the last meal that they served the poor hag lady before she was murdered in the guest house? These are the questions I'd like to hear about. But what do you think, my true crimey homies? Do you think that this was just a silly story floating in the head of a weird old lady in a nursing home? Let me know in the comments below. And subscribe to my podcast, Third Time's a Serial Crime, so you can get all the updates on all things true crimey. Thanks again for listening. And I better see you next time or else. Remember to always keep your eyes and ears open, never be afraid to get your hands dirty, and always suspect the unexpected. Until next time.